Also, the other couple of housekeeping things just to take care of before we dive into the meat of the content. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be posted on our YouTube page later on, and so that way everyone can have access to it. So if you need to get access to the recording later on, we will be posting the recording of the webinar. Next is that everyone is currently muted in GoToWebinar. So if you have any questions or comments, you won't be able to speak them out, so that way everyone can hear. So what you want to do is, on the right-hand side of the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a small section there that says questions, and you can type your questions in there, and that will come out to me and my team over here. And we will address those questions either live on air right now, or afterwards we'll follow up with you in an email after the webinar. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So what's new in Creo Sketch 4.0? So we're basically going to start off with a quick introduction in who we are, and then we'll talk about Creo in terms of the, what are some of the new things that are integrated into Creo 4, not only from the sketch experience, but also from the user interface experience itself. And then we'll dive into a demo of Creo 4, and then we'll get to the question and answers after that. Now, by way of introduction, we are Boundary Systems. So we are a product development consulting company based out of Cleveland, Ohio, but we have a reach that spans multiple states and even multiple countries as well. And we do everything from product data management to CAD lifecycle management to simulations, product development consulting. Literally anything you can do with a computer that involves product development and getting a product out there to the public. We have, expertise in all facets of that. And we've been operating now for many years, and we have tons and tons of loyal customers. Now, this particular webinar is going to be based on one of our main partners' products, so that's PTC Creo. And so sort of the first tab in here is, I think, as everyone is pretty familiar with, Creo 4.0 just came out. I want to say it's probably been in the last 6 months or so. And more and more people are starting to adopt Creo 4, particularly as the newer maintenance releases start coming out. And so we're just going to highlight some of the new things that are coming out in Creo 4, at least from a sketch or user experience as well. So the first off is and this isn't specifically with Sketch, but it'll have some impact in Sketcher as well. So the first off is a new selection paradigm, which basically means that in prior Creo releases, you had the smart selection filter that was a default, and that would always have you select, features or parts first before you could select geometry like surfaces or edges or points. And it was always very cumbersome in terms of, if you wanted to select something, you always had to double or triple select before you could get to what you actually wanted. Well, in Creo 4, they've gotten rid of the smart selection filter, and so now it's just a direct geometry selection filter. And so you can select, surfaces and edges just as easily, but they haven't gotten rid of the ability to select parts, because when you select a geometry that belongs to a certain part, you can perform some part modeling actions on the part itself. And not only that, there's also a new mini toolbar that also gives you the ability to then select the parent object of that geometry. So, if I select the surface of a part, I can then go ahead and pick the part itself. And then not only that, but there's also a new box selection technique that basically allows you to select multiple edges and perform actions like creating rounds on them. And in this case, when you're selecting the edges, it's you can imagine how in Creo 3 and older you would have to, hold Shift if you wanted to select, tangent edges or what's it called, surface loop edges or things like that. Well, in this case, in Creo 4, some of that has been made much easier just by using the box select, and I'll show you an example of what that is, when we get to that. And not only that, but there's also a new full screen UI as well in Creo 4. So basically, whenever you're working inside of Creo 4, you can activate the full screen mode. And I know some of you may be thinking, well, how's that different from clicking the maximize button, like I can do on every other window right now? Well, the difference is Creo will actually collapse certain areas of the window and fully maximize your modeling real estate. And I'll show an example of that when we get there as well. All right. So specifically as it's in Sketcher, what are some of the improvements or differences? So first off, they've dramatically improved the appearances in Sketcher. So first off, you can clip a sketch plane, or you can clip your model at your sketch plane right now. So you can sort of imagine it's like a combination of a section view plus imagine you're sketching in a section view. That's sort of how it looks like. So if you're sketching on a plane, for example, where there's some geometry protruding, outside of that plane or on top of that plane, and a lot of times you have to, rotate or navigate around that. Now it's easier to just say, hey, let's clip my sketch plane, or clip all the geometry based on my sketch plane, and that way it'll get rid of any geometry that's over that, and it makes it much easier now to sketch and use Creo with that. The other improvement is you'll notice in this case here in the screenshot, there's some, wherever you see the constraints inside of Sketcher, for example, like over here, this coincident constraint, they all highlight inside of a small green box, so which makes them easier to see as compared to Creo 3 and older, where the constraints themselves would just highlight and they were much easier to miss because they were sort of yellow and sort of blending out with a white background, and you would inadvertently add constraints that you didn't want to add because you didn't know that they were there, when you were sketching. In this case, the constraints pop out in a small green box that makes them much more visible than before. And then not only that, but there's also a new mini toolbar as well. So just like you'll notice in the screenshot over there, right at your mouse tip, PTC has added some mini toolbar commands that allow you to model much quicker. So you have basically faster access to the commands. You don't have to travel all the way up to the ribbon in order to select a command. You can access it straight from your mini toolbar, and not only that, you can also customize that mini toolbar as well and add whatever commands you want to that as well. And so really what that means is you spend much less time traveling your mouse up and down from the ribbon, and much more time creating your design and finishing out of Sketcher. All right. Now this isn't again directly related to Sketcher, but as it relates to sketch-based features, we'll talk about this as well. So some of the improvements to sketch-based features is that there's now an easier option to access the side to option in sketch-based features. So if you wanted to, for example, create an extrude with two sides to it, in prior versions of Creo, you would always have to travel up to the ribbon in order to do that. Now there's a much easier way to do that. And not only that, but now you can also create a negative extrude direction, right? And also negative revolve as well. So that really gives you a lot of flexibility in how you can, in the kinds of geometries you can create with just the same feature. And then not only that as well, but you can also create an extrude with an offset. And so in this case, you're referencing an existing surface, and then you're offsetting, either ahead or under that surface. And so again, this allows you to combine multiple features, or I guess the geometry that you would have to create with multiple features, you can now create with just one feature. In this case, with the extrude with offset option. Yeah, and so really it improves your productivity and user experience. It allows you much greater control over the geometry, and now you have much more design flexibility as a result. All right, so at this point, I'll pause for a second and switch over to a live demo of Creo. And so I'll hold on a second here while I switch screens and turn on Creo right here. So, all right, so right here we have Creo 4.0 right now, and I just have this assembly on screen. It's almost like a tank, but not exactly what you would use in the military. Sort of like a tank that I don't know, sort of an entertainment sort of thing where it has a grip or claw. And what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to a certain side of that tank. Say we'll call it over here, and we want to develop a part that's on this pad over here, right? So I'll pick on that, and you'll notice what happens in Creo 3. In Creo 4. First off, whenever you select on any geometry, right, there's no longer any smart selection filter. You're selecting on the geometry directly, the surface, in this case, or the edges or the points as well, right? And once you select on that, a couple things happen. First off, the mini toolbar appears, and that allows you to access a whole bunch of commands right immediately from here. And not only that, but Creo 4 will automatically search in the model tree for that item, right? So historically in Creo, 3 and older, you had to always right-click and say search in model tree. And I think even in the Wildfire series, the option to search in model tree didn't even exist. Now, for any object you click on, Creo 4 starts to search in the model tree immediately. And so you spend less time looking for objects and much more time just designing your objects, right? So in this case, I'm just going to pick on this right here, and I want to go in and design that. So I'll say let's activate this piece over here, and I want to go ahead and design some features in there. So basically, what you'll notice right now is this pad sits right underneath this pin over here. And so I want to go ahead and design some sort of a clevis that holds onto that pin, that's resting on this pad over here. So we'll start off with that, and let's see here. Oh no. Yep. All right. So right now we're in Sketcher. So I just activated the part and went into Sketcher. And the first improvement in Sketcher is now you'll notice my sketch plane is in the middle of all of this geometry right here, right? Which makes it more difficult for me to see, what references I want to select, the pin and where it is, and how to reference the pin and everything like that. And so now in Creo 4, it's very easy for you to just go ahead and say, let's clip all the geometry by the sketch plane. And what this basically does is it sort of creates a section view. Actually, hold on a second. Yep, sorry about that. So yeah, what this basically does is it creates a section view right in the middle of your sketch plane. It cuts away all the geometry on top of your sketch plane, and now you can very easily see, the outline of the pin and all the references you need to select right inside of there, right? Now, the other thing about Sketcher I basically got about Creo 4 in general that I talked about, and I'll show right now, is the full screen mode. So if I click on this button over here, I can toggle full screen mode on or off, or I can hit F11 to do that. Now, some of you wonder, how's that different from clicking on the maximize button, over here? Well, right now, if I click on maximize, this is what happens with my window, right? If I go ahead and click on my full screen mode over here, what happens is something very different. So let's see, it actually moves it over to my second screen. So let me hold on a second here. Okay. Yep, I apologize for that. I have two screens, and with full screen mode, it switched it over to my other screen, so I'll move it over here. So right now, without full screen mode, this is how it looks like, right? And whenever I turn on full screen mode, yep, it maximizes everything, so that way I can have basically much more modeling real estate. I can still move my mouse over to the left and access my model tree. It'll pop it out automatically. I can still move my mouse to the top and it'll automatically pop out the ribbon, and I can pick any command I want, right? I can still move my mouse to the bottom, and the message bar at the bottom will pop out as well. But again, for the most part, all of those things are collapsed, so that way I have much more modeling real estate. So in this case, I want to go ahead and start sketching. So I'll say I want to do this. Now, some of the other improvements in Creo 4 are the creation of automatic references, or especially in Sketcher, right? So right now, whenever I say I want to sketch a circle, right? Right now, I don't have any references selected. And just as in Creo 3 and older versions, you would always have to go to the top here, pick on references, select all the references you want to start using before you could start sketching, right? Now, whenever you start sketching, you say, for example, you missed a reference or two, you would have to stop in the middle of what you're doing, go back and select the reference, and then come back and continue, right? Well, in this case now with Creo 4, I can just as easily put my mouse over what I want to be a reference, and Creo 4 picks up on that. And now you'll notice those three yellow dots, and also this yellow dot in the middle here. Now it thinks I want to use the center of that circle as a reference. And so I say, yes, that's exactly what I want to do, and I want to snap it to that existing circle that I picked as a reference, right? So automatic reference selection without me having to go to the reference box and pick it myself, right? Now I'll go ahead and do the same over here as well, and create a circle, I'll say probably about that size. And then not only that, but you'll also notice, for example, because that's already selected as a reference, right? I'm moving my mouse straight down, and it's keeping that constraint of taking that point directly in line with the center point at the top, right? I can bring it down here, and it picks the bottom plane as a reference over here, and I can snap to that and start to sketch on that as well, right? Actually, I should switch this here to a line, so that way I can start drawing a line over here like that. Yep, and then I'll go ahead and finish that off with a tangent constraint over here. And yeah, once again, you'll notice right here as I have my mouse on that circle, I want the line to be on the circle and tangent to it. And those are the two constraints that pop up just in that green highlighted box, right? So again, it's much more visible to see what constraints you're applying to your design at the time. So I'll pick over here, and then I'll do the same over here as well. Let's see, so I want it to be here. Yeah, like that. Yeah. And now you'll notice, I'll point this out again. So what I did over here in terms of, so putting my mouse at the midpoint as a reference and then just moving it all the way down to where I start to sketch down here. Ordinarily, that is something that you typically would have had to do with the center line, right? Initially, you would have, in prior versions of Creo, you would have to draw a center line from here that's vertically down before you can now start, picking that the midpoint where they meet, and then, going off on that. But again, in this case, you can do that in Creo 4, much easier because it automatically selects references for you. So you spend less time picking references and much more time interacting with your design, doing exactly what you want, and then accepting your sketch. So in this case, I'll pop out over here, I'll trim this piece over here. And now I have most of what I want. I'll just come over here and say I want that to be about 0.75. Yep. And dimension this over here. Yep. And now that we're done, again, I can just right click without having to travel up to the ribbon and say OK. And now I've just accepted that sketch. Right? Now, next up in here, I'll say let's start designing this extrude over here. And what I'll do here is I'll extrude and I'll let the geometry itself control the extent of my extrude, right? So I'll say let's extrude up until that surface, right? That side surface over there. And we'll right click right now, and again, this is what I meant by easier access to side 2 features. Now I can just say, hey, let's create a side 2 feature. And now I can go ahead and sort of have a negative depth in side 2. So if I go up to the ribbon so you can see what's going on, basically the side 1 extrudes all the way to the surface, and then side 2 is a negative extrude away from the sketch plane, out to the left over here, right? So again, that's an improvement that they've added with Creo 4, and so now I can say that it's going to be, I don't know, about 0.65, and we'll say, yeah, we'll accept that. And yep. And let's see here. Oh, yeah. Now, I mentioned the geometry selection filter immediately selects geometry for you, right? But again, the menu toolbar allows you to select anything you want, really. So right now, I select a surface on this geometry, and now I can come over here and I can select from basically the parents of that reference. So now I can say I want to pick on the extrude itself, and now I can mirror that extrude feature, right? So yeah, the mini toolbar really is much easier for you to use when it comes to creating geometry. Now I'll go ahead and open this part as well, and we'll come into this and do a couple more things as well. So to start off, I'll show my planes again, and then I'll go ahead and create a plane. Now, one of the improvements that they've added in Creo 4 is, let's see here, is I'll hold Control and pick over here, is the creation of a mid-plane tool automatically. So now if I want to create a plane in the middle of two parallel planes, I want to create a plane at the midplane of that, I can easily do that just by selecting the two parallel planar entities. And Creo automatically understands I'm trying to create a midplane, and I can just do that. So again, creating a midplane in prior releases of Creo, you would have to create at least 2, 3, 4 different datums just so you can get to your midplane, right? But now all of that is eliminated, right? And so we'll go on with our midplane here and say let's sketch on that guy. And once again, We'll start off with a rectangle, and again, I don't have to select any references before I start sketching. Really, all I do is I move my mouse over to what I want to use as a reference, and it automatically highlights and selects that as a reference. And now I can start to click and create my sketch, right? And now you'll notice right over here, it selected that as a reference line. It also selects the geometry of the part here as a reference line as well, right? And we'll say that's going to be 1. Yeah. All right. So let's see here. Next up is I'll go ahead and extrude this all the way up to that surface as well. And we'll do the same over here as well. We'll say we want a side 2. And we'll extrude to there as well. Now, the other option that's been added for sketch-based features is the ability to then go ahead and offset based on a selected reference plane, or I guess, or selected surface. So in this case, I could go ahead and create that offset to start off over here. And now I could say, hey, let's offset my extrude based on the profile of that selected reference, right? And I want to offset it back by a certain amount. I'll say, I don't know, that's going to be 0.25 over here. And same over here as well. So I can basically push it back inward like that, right? So again, this makes it much easier to create your sketch without, to create your feature without having to use 2, 3, 4 different features to extrude and then cut out some different material, or you sketch from the side profile and then have to select a whole bunch of different references and project and offset and then thicken and trim lines and all of that. Basically, you just go ahead and create a square and you can start to offset based on surface references. And now once I have the geometry I want, I can accept that, and that's done. Yeah. Now, I mentioned the selection filter is primarily just based on geometry. I can also come here and specifically select, okay, I want it to pick only edges. And now what I meant by the box selection is if I wanted to select all the edges of this feature that I just created here in order to create rounds on them. Historically, with Creo 3 and older, I would have to do a whole bunch of finagling with my keyboard. I would have to, right-click and query select, or I'd have to hold Shift and then, mouse over a certain edge to select a tangent loop, or I'd have to pick an edge first and then hold Shift, or pick a surface first and then hold Shift. And a lot of times that action was unclear as to what you had to do. Now I can just easily drag a box over this here. Creo 4 selects all the edges of that profile that I just created. And now you can again access our mini toolbar by right-clicking and just say let's round all of that. So again, that makes it much easier for you to, spend less time trying to remember mouse clicks and what actions you have to do, and you can just easily head directly to, selecting the geometry you want and then rounding it off, and now you're done with your design and you can move on to better things. So really, from this here, we'll go ahead and I'll close this out. And now, yeah, the assembly updates, and now this is the final part basically. So the sort of the clevis part that holds onto that pin right over there, right? All right. So that basically covers it for the demonstration portion of things in terms of what's new in Creo Sketch. So at this time, we'll field any questions you have. So for all of you who have questions, again, you can type them into the questions panel or your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll go ahead and take a look at however many we can answer right now live on air, and whichever ones we can't get to, we'll definitely follow up with you after the webinar. Okay. So let's see. So someone asks, are you able to show the clipping at a sketch plane? Sure, I can go ahead and show that. Let's see. Okay. Give me a second here so I can get back into Sketcher. All right. So someone asked, could you show the clipping at a sketch plane? And then another question is, can external references be created from surfaces rather than just edges? And I'll go ahead and answer both of those with the one example here. So I'll say, let's see, no, activate first. Then we'll do this. We'll go back into the sketch. So in order to show what's going on, so with the sketch plane clipping, basically what's going on is this. Right now my sketch plane is in the middle of this geometry right here, right around this this pin, right? And ordinarily, if I was going to view the sketch plane in 2D, I have all this geometry here in the front obscuring my sketch plane and any geometry or references I want to select behind it, right? And so with clipping at your sketch plane, what that basically does is this: you click on that button, and that you can almost think of it as creating a section temporarily of your model at your sketch plane. So that way now it chops off all of the overhanging geometry in front of your sketch plane, and now you can directly see any geometry or references you want to select and base your sketch off of. And then the other question that asks about does it select surface references rather than just edges as well? Yeah, so if I come over here, you'll notice in this case here, one of the references it selects is the edge, but also one of the references it selects is a surface as well. So yes, PTC Creo does have the ability to select either or. It's not just always selecting edge references for you. All right. So next question here, does this create external references, and can the external references be easily removed? Let's see, that would be a yes. Yeah, so it would create external references that you would then have to manage. So obviously, doing something like this, you'd have to plan this as part of your design intent and be aware of the consequences of that. yes, you can remove external references much easier by using, or you can even prevent external references from even selecting in the first place. If that's your design intent, you can do that from your config.pro. But yes, this method will allow external references to be selected if you just go ahead and use it. This is basically almost how all of Creo has worked so far. Okay. So the next question here is, are the F keys now controlled by Creo? This person says, I have some map keys that are tied, to certain keys that Creo doesn't allow anymore. Well, and the reason for asking that question is the person has some map keys tied to certain keys that are now not showing up. Well, to answer that question, I also have some trouble with that as well. Now the reason is Creo, in Creo 4, what PTC has added is the ability to use a ton of different screen commands as basically with keyboard shortcuts or map keys, or so not with keyboard shortcuts, I'll say. So for example, something as easy as this. So if I click on this shading with reflections, now you'll notice all of these have, keyboard shortcuts, right? Control +1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? And so some of those keyboard shortcuts also have to do with the function keys as well. So usually so the way that affects you if you're upgrading from prior releases is some of your map keys may now be occupied by another keyboard shortcut. So for example, in my case here, one of my map keys that I typically use is the SM map key, right, to open Creo Simulate, right? Now whenever I do that, it says, hey, Creo 4 has a keyboard shortcut where if you hit S, it opens Sketcher, right? And now that's going to conflict with your Open Creo Simulate map key, because that also starts with S as well. And so now it asks, okay, how do you want to manage this conflict? So that is so basically Creo 4, they've added tons of keyboard shortcuts to many of the on-screen commands. But then sort of the downside of that is that interferes with your map keys that you create. Now, the good part of it is they actually do have a tool that sort of tells you, hey, by the way, this already has an interference with a keyboard shortcut. Or if you're creating a map key and you're creating it with, I don't know, SJ or something, it'll tell you, hey, this map key is going to interfere with another, keyboard shortcut, so you may not want to create this. Now, how do you go ahead and work around that? I just go ahead and use another letter that isn't a keyboard shortcut. So, for example, Z that I know of is not a keyboard shortcut. So instead of having my map key just be SM, I could just call that, ZSM, right? And that will work, just as fine, and do everything I want it to do. So yeah, so that's the one thing in Creo 4 that could interfere with how you use the rest of your map keys. Right. Looks like we're almost out of time here. So yeah, don't wanna have this go way too over. So the rest of the questions here, we'll go ahead and answer those offline. We'll send an email to everyone that asked those questions, so that way we can get those answered. Yep. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar. We really appreciate you being here. If you have any other questions or comments, you can email me directly. My email address is on screen there. Or if you have any questions that have to do with dollar amounts, so how much is something, or how much is a particular extension or feature, things like that in Creo 4, those would be sales questions that Steve will be much better be able to field. And so you can email Steve, down there below as well. If there are no other questions, thank you so much for attending today's webinar. We really appreciate you being here, and join us next week again for another boundary webinar Wednesday. Thank you. Bye.